No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Do you go to the store?
No.
You did.
Lorenzo.
It's a great way to start the story.
Lorenzo.
Lorenzo. Shout out to Lorenzo.
Lorenzo.
I don't think that he's watched this or ever
That was
will.
nice of you.
Probably
Well, we love
not.
him.
We do love him. As a group, we love Lorenzo.
I think as a culture we love Lorenzo.
So
I should hope so.
Lorenzo.
Pro-Renzo.
A pro-zo
Pro-zo.
experience.
He's
Yeah.
so wiggly.
He's a wiggly man. Very wiggly man.
He's a squirmin' wormin.
That's true. That's true.
That's my term for that.
That's a good term.
A squirmy worm.
It's applicable often, yeah.
Yeah, well, especially to Lorenzo.
That's why you can't sleep in a bed with both Kenny and a cat, because Kenny's a squirmin' wormin, and he wakes up the cat, and then the cat wakes up Kenny, and then it's all just over.
Man. Yeah.
The beginning part of that sentence seemed like it was going to be very interesting for
Yeah.
a second.
Yeah.
Kenny and Lorenzo.
That's what I thought was going to happen.
I thought so. I was on bated
Jen
breath.
just dropping
I
that
was
cat.
right
That
there.
would be-
Like,
That's why you can't sleep.
That would
on
be
the
so
A
bus.
much-
sudden reveal.
Kenny and Lorenzo is just too much adorable man in one like dose. Like you just explode.
Did we all bring the right book today? I feel like we've been bringing
Yeah.
book first
I got-
half a bunch.
I got second.
Well, I think I mentioned last time that it had been so long since I had picked up one of these books that I started reading the beginning of the second
Yeah.
book, like the second
Right.
book or something, and I was just like, wait.
I did that today. I was going through chapter 2 of this one. I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, like, oh, he's in the market and he's gonna go meet Orem.
Yeah.
And then I was like, wait.
I've read the second chapter of this book like 5 times now, which I think is more than I've read any other chapter.
Yeah, well, that's-
of this whole series.
That's what you have to do to understand any of it.
Yeah,
Oh,
same.
it's not the pencil.
And in fact, this is the point where in the past when I've tried these books, this is where I start to like peter out. This is where I'm like, what is this? Or like even later in the third
Oh, yeah.
book.
The third book is where
Where
I
a lot of
stalled.
people, a lot of people stall here.
We're in the third
The
book,
tunnels
right?
are tough. The
Yeah,
tunnels
this-
are
this-
tough.
the
The
tunnels.
war is kind of tough.
It's funny because it's so meta that it's hard to get through the tunnels. I feel like I
Yeah.
lose
Yeah.
my place. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
so repetitive. It's
Yeah.
hard to
Yeah, it's
shift to the
very
next
samey.
thing, which is exactly like being
Right.
lost in the tunnels.
It's just not a great writing strategy. You know? It's
I mean, depends on
I
what
beg to
your
differ.
it depends on what your goal is.
It's a good concept, I think. It's not necessarily
I think at
the most
the point-
enjoyable
At the
read.
point that you're here in this series, like he's not worried about keeping you.
Yeah.
Right,
I guess I'm
right.
kind of curious about that. Like, how many people, obviously a lot of people read Shadow of the Torturer and,
Yeah, but how many read this?
and then tap out.
Not many
But,
people read
like,
this.
yeah, I'm really curious how many people get to, like, any part of Long Sun or, like, into Short Sun or something, and they're just like, I can't.
That's
Like-
what I'm saying.
like,
He's
is
like, you're
that
not worried about
possible?
retention at that point.
I'm
Like,
I'm just very curious.
if you've made it into the third book of Long Sun, like you're not gonna not finish Long Sun.
Yeah, like, you gotta keep going.
There's no
for
way.
sure. But
Yeah. So you get stuck in the tunnels.
I guess it is. I mean, it is a bit of a contrast because so much of the rest of this, of Long Sun in particular, has been very like zippy. You know, like things
Yeah,
move
especially
quickly.
the first book.
Yeah, especially in the first book. I guess things start slowing down in Lake, and then.
Come to a grinding
yeah,
halt.
yeah, and now
the
that-
tunnel.
Yeah, now in the tunnels, it's like, okay.
It's interesting we were talking about Stanley Kubrick.
Sorry,
You
the
know?
fourth one,
It's
actually. I
like-
feel like the fourth one is good.
I feel like Eyes Wide Shut had a lot of shots of like a camera slowly moving down hallways and like turning the corner or down streets. and
Well, that's
stuff.
all of Stanley.
That is.
That's
Yeah.
also The Shining.
That's right,
It's also
that's right.
very Linden.
Yeah. So this
Very Linden.
kinda,
A fast-paced
that's a way to
movie.
think about it.
You know,
Oh, man.
it's just
A
like a
roller coaster.
whirlwind. Yeah.
Imagine if you
You
actually
remember how we
felt
did
that
this
way.
on the internet last time,
It's too
and
much.
I overslept and you guys called me?
Yeah.
Ann's experience of that was that she was dead asleep. My phone rang, and then I just screamed for 3 hours. That's what she felt like happened last time we met.
What?
Because you were on the stream screaming.
Well, first I
Oh,
was,
yeah.
I just answered the phone and was like, okay, I'm gonna get a cab and be right there. Oh, it's on the internet. Okay, I'm signing up. And I just kept going from there. She
Yeah.
said.
Wasn't your guys' experience with that phone call very similar? Where all of a sudden I just started screaming and,
Yeah.
and you were like, put it on mute, and I was like, okay, yes, yeah, no, yeah, but, and I just kept yelling back and forth.
Yeah, we were like having a
'Cause- yeah,
conversation,
'cause
and then
you're
Jordan
like,
just
Connor,
like, no, we were just like, oh my gosh.
Connor, it's okay, it's fine. Connor.
Mark's like, Jordan, mute, Jordan.
Yeah, my alarm didn't go off. Anyways, I just realized I was screaming. And it made me-
I mean, that is part of the Wolfpack mode.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
Screaming.
yelling, yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Wolfpack howl.
That's right.
Well, now that we've settled that,
I feel like
so
this
are
chapter
we
is
still
so
in? We're still
cyberpunk.
in 2 then.
What?
Yeah, we are.
Where
Yeah, we're
do we
second
think
half
we
of
are?
2.
I feel like we kind
Kind
of.
What did
got
we get
me.
through?
I think we didn't quite get to Silk showing up at the ceremony.
Oh, they're doing the sacrifice.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
3 pages.
Yeah, I think we
And
kind
then-
of we talked almost
I think-
completely about
I
the
think-
sacrifice.
Right. Yeah, I think like we kind of basically got up to Silk showing up, and then in
But there's the tunnels in the middle, right?
yeah, in the tunnel, tunnels kind of go back and forth, but I mean, they're kind of just the same thing the whole time. So
Did I bring up the other girls are always telling me how tough I am because I'm so big? Did I bring that up last time? Because I really like.
I
I
noted
think that
that
you did.
the last time I read
I
it.
think I did.
I don't think you brought it up though. I don't remember. Is it
I don't remember.
I
I don't remember.
I thought that we talked about it, but I'm happy to talk about it again.
I was just trying to find where we were, and I was like, came up to that
Oh.
point, and I was like, I couldn't remember if I say.
I don't-
something I'm curious
You
about.
might have, but I don't remember.
Yeah, something I'm curious about with Chenille in this part is that I feel like maybe in the first chapter, maybe she's got like some kind of amnesia, right? Like because she and Ock are like talking like they've never met each other. I didn't know.
Well,
if
she was possessed.
at that
But
time.
that's
I thought that was
no,
after
they're
she was
talking.
possessed.
They're
That's a
doing
reference to a conversation they had earlier.
about
I think
how
in the
they were
second
gonna
group.
pretend like they had never met and
Oh.
start their relationship.
Oh yeah, that's
over
right.
again.
That's right.
Okay.
They're
Yeah,
doing.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
both doing that on purpose. It's like a game.
They're
Okay,
being
okay,
cute.
that's fine. I was a little
Very
confused.
Terrace
Because I think because I read that like 4 months ago.
Yeah.
That's reasonable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then and then in this one, Chenille's like talking to Incus and she's talking about Ock and like seems very like I know what's going on. So it's
What,
like,
you don't
did
remember
you
that
work
like
this out?
4-sentence conversation like a book and a half ago? Jeez.
That had no bearing on the plot at all.
I mean, yeah, you could say that about like any 4 sentences in this whole cycle.
You gotta be plugged
It's
in.
just because they had that like really bad series of interactions, and then they were just like kind of like hated each other, and they decided
Yeah.
they didn't want to hate each other, so they were just gonna
Yeah,
forget that
makes
they had
sense.
ever met.
He like kicks her or something that they
Yeah.
talk about here.
Yeah, he kicks her. I think he might have hit her too. He might have bopped her on the head.
Well, didn't he needed to bop her on the head when she was
Yeah,
possessed, right? Because
think
like
so.
that was how he got her into the boat.
There was
or, like,
something.
something like that.
there was I mean, she was like running around naked and like
Yeah, he wasn't being a.
she was pretty insane.
Maybe
Like,
he was being a brute, but we still like Ock. We still like
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, he wasn't being
Yeah, something
that
happened.
bad. It was a
Sometimes
reasonable.
things happen.
No
yeah,
redemption without
she knows being out.
Very
She-
short.
You had set her right.
Out of pocket.
classic mechanical pencil.
Oh yeah,
Oh.
it's the only kind.
I almost brought that one, but then I brought this one.
I have a
It's a Mitsubishi.
I have
Wow.
a deck mounted pencil sharpener in there if you need
Yeah.
one. Just so you know.
Oh,
If
my
I
house
break-
is full
if
of
I-
really nice mechanical pencils that Sarah brings back from the art store. They're like the Japanese like
Ooh,
crafted
yeah.
ones, you know, like they're like little machines. Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah,
I
the
like the Germans.
like-
Rotring. That's the best mechanical pencil.
I have this one that's it's not even a mechanical pencil; it's just a lead holder where it's
Mm.
like
Oh.
it's just like
Yeah.
this
Those are
really
nice.
great like nice feeling like shaft that you put this long lead into,
Mhm.
and it doesn't like click or anything. It just like opens up and you can pull it out a little bit. It's like,
Jeremy has
Do you
one
have
of
a
those at the
tiny
museum.
sharpener for its?
Yeah.
it's got a
In the
little
end.
yeah, it's got a
Oh,
one
yeah.
in the end, so you can get it
Nice.
like this really fine point.
I do kind of want one of those.
It's,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
think
you
it's like a
gotta get
I mean, drafting tools in general are like
Yeah.
very
nice.
cool.
Drop your favorite pencils in the comments below.
Absolutely.
What's your favorite pen?
To that end, the rapidograph,
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
pretty nice.
Yep.
For those who didn't hear, I'm using a Mitsubishi. It's a very nice pencil, very smooth, has a good weight to it. Glossy.
White eraser.
Oh, and it's such a soft eraser. I'll pass it around actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a nice pencil.
I like these things.
Absolutely. Who doesn't love writing implements?
Kind of
Stylophile.
Oh, it's Mitsu-Bishi.
Yeah. I think, well, Mitsubishi, I think, is like 5 different companies in Japan that make completely different
Okay. It's not like they started as a pencil.
But it has the
company.
same
No, it's a
logo.
Japanese
You're right.
3M.
But it has the
They're just
same
a massive
Oh, yeah.
conglomerate. It's
logo. Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Like
Yamaha
3M.
is the same deal. Yeah, 3M.
I know about those, but I thought that Mitsubishi was different. I
held them to a higher standard.
I thought they were different.
Mitsubishi Pencil Co. Limited. That's amazing.
Well, it's like the way, like, what did Nintendo started off
It's
as like
HP,
a
it's not even
Playing
a
cards.
hard company?
It's not even a
Yeah.
For like 100 years, and then one day they're like, well, this isn't working. Video game.
Well, I feel there are a lot of car companies that started out as bicycle makers.
Peugeot.
Kia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
This is nice.
man, one of my
This
roommates
isn't
in
just
college
some,
had a
you know, pencil they
Panasonic
hand out at
bicycle.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like,
That's classic.
This is
yeah, I
fucking
think a lot of
great.
those Japanese
Yeah,
companies.
good
Are
call.
just like, I mean, you know, like Yamaha makes pianos and motorcycles.
Right.
So,
And trumpets and
All
everything.
of a
well,
sudden.
yeah, I mean, but you know, a lot of range.
I got some
just how
Yamaha
it
drums
is.
upstairs.
Hell yeah, I mean, Yamaha
This
makes
eraser's
great
so
shit.
smooth, so-
Like in general.
Yeah, their instruments and their
I know.
motorcycles are both highly regarded.
That's yeah, you're right. That's effective.
Which
You're
one's it going to be?
rewatching Terrace House, right?
I don't know.
We got all the way through
Gonna
Boys and
flip through
Girls in
them
the City recently.
With this.
Yeah, we're
Point.
getting to the end of that.
Yeah,
We're just
right.
gonna keep going, doing
Oh
I
man,
don't
it's
know, I
it's
can't
a,
decide.
so much.
it just gets
Who did
like it
this?
puts us in such a like we just get so stuck in it that it's like we can't really just watch more of it once we. I don't even think we finished opening.
If you like Japanese quote unquote reality shows, Falling in Love Like a Romance movie is, I believe, is on Netflix.
That's
Called
what it's
Falling
called.
in Love
Like
Like,
a
a romance film. Maybe that's what it is.
Wow.
Wow. This one, just check it out. I won't
Okay.
go down the rabbit hole, but if you're into silly teenager, very 100% earnest Japanese people navigating love, it's
I mean,
chef's kiss.
I am.
Is it
I am.
is it really slow?
It's
do
pretty.
they take
It's
things
pretty slow.
very slow?
In terms of like it, you watch it and you're like, none of these people have even entertained the idea of like what it is to be in a relationship before. So okay, quick. Here's what the premise is: is that it's an acting camp, right? Supposedly, so you get all of these like beautiful young Japanese people, and they're together in acting camp, and they're all auditioning. So every week to be in romance movies, they all want to be in love films. And every week, 2 of them get chosen by the judges through all these various activities to star in a romance scene together. And then, so then every episode kind of builds up to this, and they get there, and then each of these scenes kind of builds up to a kiss. And none of these people have ever kissed anybody before. So it's like torturously slow as this kiss is like being built up to over the course of the minutes in this scene, and the show turns into a little weird love movie at the end of each episode because they're actually showing you the scene that these 2 actors are in, and they like, and then when they get the kiss, their faces like lean in towards each other, and their lips just touch,
Just right.
and then there's. And there's no kiss at all, but it's like absolutely tender and like so earnest.
That's
like
the beautiful thing about Terrace House is that it's like
so polite.
it will take like you'll start a season of these like 6 people living in a house together. They're like for the express purpose of dating each other. Not necessarily that
Right.
everybody has like their reasons for being there, but like
We know.
the dating is a huge part of it, and it's like they've all seen the show before, so they know what the deal is.
Yeah.
And it takes each episode is 1 week, and it will take like 15 weeks for anybody to like hold hands.
Yeah.
Or say that they like each other.
Okay, right.
And then kind of once they break that seal, they're like, yeah, we're fucking. but it's like, just the build is so gradual and it's so tentative. And it's intoxicating.
Yeah.
It's great.
I don't know.
Watch Terrace House.
Yeah, I don't know if that's an aspect of Japanese, dating, or just a projected
P-
aspect, within their own
I know,
culture.
like
but-
PDA is like a really a lot of people on the show like don't really want to be seen like kissing each other on camera and stuff just because there's this like I don't know, just kind of like
unlike the Europeans.
right.
I wouldn't want to be seen kissing someone on TV. That's
No,
weird.
I kind of get it.
Oh.
In the
Yeah.
last season that I watched that I think Ryan's watching now, there's 2 people who are actually like pretending that they're like kind of date, like they keep on going on dates and then being like, yeah, nothing's really happening. This is kind of going nowhere. And then the other housemates are eventually like, you guys have to stop lying. We know that you're fucking all the time.
We live here, we can hear it.
we live in this house with you, and you're asking us to lie for you on television. And they're like, yeah, it was the biggest scandal. But yeah, they're just like, yeah, we don't really want to like put this out in the world, so we're just gonna like make up another story that we're gonna do on TV.
That's fair.
But it made for great
It's
television.
fair.
It is.
Yeah.
It's fair.
Totally.
I didn't want to show it. It's interesting.
Terrace House.
I think this chapter is exploring agency in an interesting way that makes me think of Prometheus Rising by Robert Anton Wilson.
Tell me about it.
Well, so like in the beginning at the funeral, Mater is talking about the body and the breath and then with the ruling part. And it makes me think of the beginning of Prometheus Rising, where he talks about, are you your hardware or your software? And I think the real answer is that you're neither of those things, you're the user, which manipulates both the hardware and the software. And then you go on to the robots talking about, like, the meaning of life, and how... you think that you want to be working for yourself, but you want to be working for somebody else, because if you're working for yourself, then it doesn't matter if you die, but if you're working for somebody else, then like you're living for them, and that gives life meaning.
Who said this?
Hammerstone
Oh, okay.
kind of riff on
Is
that.
that
We
the next
could dig
chapter?
into that.
Oh, is it maybe the
I think it
next?
might be next chapter.
Well,
Yeah,
shit,
when he
I'm
talks
sorry.
about how ink case is
It's
like.
related to your point.
It's really crazy how he's talking about like. Wouldn't it be, I mean, you guys want to live, but man, I
don't
would
want
love to
this
sit
in
down
front of
and never get up.
But and it's the exact same. Like I remember last time we were talking about the like "you're gonna die today" speech, and like how that's the same thing. It's like giving death meaning gives life meaning, and it's how you defeat death. And that's where I start chanting, "Each god is the master of time and space and defeater of death."
Makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I wonder if, I don't know, people in this world, because their world is a little bit different than ours, treat life and death a little less preciously than maybe we do right now. Like, or I don't know about, like, how previous cultures on Earth felt about death. Or, like, imagine being a soldier in some sort of, I don't know, like, medieval battle or something. Like, did you, like, fear for your life in the same way that a soldier would today?
It's interesting we were just talking about Japan. Because
Yeah.
Japan, their attitude towards death continues into the present. It's like a land that's ravaged by earthquakes and fires regularly.
Mm-hmm.
And people's attitude towards death there is very different than ours.
I think that death and life are more precious when you're more willing to die. Kind of like
Right.
we can't conceive of something that we would be willing to die for because we just want to live
Because
as
we're not
long as
because
possible.
we're not willing to die.
Because we're just trying to get a high score.
Yeah.
But if you can conceive of like, yes, I will die for this person, I will die for this country, like then death is precious. Death is meaningless to us, and that's why we flee it. Because if we die, then our life is meaningless. Our life is only meaningful when we're living it.
Yeah.
But if life and death are meaningful, death is not the end.
I used to have a Playboy magazine with an interview with Gore Vidal, and he had talked about how, and this was in like the early '80s, I think.
Such like
And
he's such a Playboy magazine interview. Like,
There should be.
And he said, he was talking to the interviewer and saying that like they had done some recent survey of college students, and like they're asking them about death, and that like some incredibly large, overwhelming percentage of the late 1970s college students felt that nothing happens after you, that once you're dead, it's over. There's no more you anymore, and that this was like a change over the last century, and that a corresponding change was that there was also nothing worth dying for. And he was saying that like this is why America will not really be part of the future of the globe. It's because like if you don't think that anything is possible to have at all could ever happen to you after death, then there's no reason to die for anything, and if there's no reason to die for anything, you can't change history.
Certainly. I mean, if all that awaits you is the void, then you wanna avoid that as long as possible.
Avoid the void.
Eat, drink,
Avoid the
marry.
void.
Avoid the void.
He ruins
Pizza.
failed pizza campaign.
Avoid the void.
Wait,
They were like,
cool. I
"Ah,
don't know. I
switch this
think
up."
they're cool.
Fill your void with pizza.
Fill the void.
I mean, yeah, that's what pizza does.
there's definitely a link there, right? Like I don't know about the interpretation, but there's like
Yeah, between
personally,
pizza and
but like there's definitely I'm less willing to die. Also, there's nothing beyond death. Like those are two, I think, like consistently growing points of view throughout American, right? Like populations, at least, like moving
And
progressively through time.
It kind of makes global warming and not having children make more sense too. I think, in a way, I think.
Yeah.
Like I don't care if the globe collapses tomorrow. Why do I give a shit about anything after 40 years from now? You
Right,
know, like,
yeah.
Right.
Why would I have children? Then, like, they just ruin the middle part of my life, and I don't give a fuck about what happens after I die.
I'm working at the museum right now, and I was walking over there yesterday with a buddy of mine who also works there, and they're like doing all this construction at Hopkins, and he was like, what are they doing this for? Like, what future is this for? You know? And he's
crazy.
like, this is not, because we have a mutual good friend who's a climate scientist. He's like, Delta says we only have 3 more generations. Like, why make this new building or whatever?
Yeah.
And I was like, this has nothing to do with anything but now.
Oh,
like
yeah,
this,
yeah.
This is
This is how
only
we
about
earn money
current
right now.
profit margins.
the
Yeah, it
new-
has nothing to
the
do with
new building-
future generations.
Yeah, the new building is about building a new building.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with who's going to be in
Well, it's
it.
about getting the
Later,
donors and making
like,
making the
it's-
contractors money and
It's just about
real estate, developing the real estate.
it's just about
blah, blah, blah,
exponential
blah.
growth
Funding
at all
more
times at all
COVID.
costs.
When I went to Hopkins, they built the big construction that was like the reason they were tearing up the whole Charles Street was the Matin Center.
Yeah.
And now the thing that they're knocking over is the Matin
Yeah,
Center.
it's awesome.
It's so weird.
It's awesome.
It was like, that was like the future. When I was there, they were like, oh man, you wish you would have come to school 10 years later because when this thing's built, it's going to totally revolutionize student life. And we were just seeing like backhoes.
It's like
Yeah,
that's the thing.
and
it's like,
also-
they're just buildings. Like
Yeah.
it can have a bunch of like cool shit in it, but like it's just a building. It's not. It may be like less full of mold than an older building, but also maybe not.
But also the other Hopkins thing, on 29th Street, there's all those really beautiful old row. There's like 7 in a row, beautiful old row houses that they're demolishing. That they bought. They're like, well, we have to demolish them because they're dilapidated, but they've owned them for the last 20 years.
yeah,
So
right,
like they bought them, let them go to shit, and now they're ripping them down. They're like, there's nothing we can do. We can't like fix them.
Yeah.
It's too expensive to fix them.
Everybody who works there has been hired long since they were
Exactly.
apprentices, so they all can go like, yeah,
That's
I know
ex-
it sucks, but I didn't work.
That's
there.
exactly it. That is exactly true. Like the people, all the
Yeah.
spokespeople are just like, this was happened before my tenure here, and
It's really amazing.
Yeah,
The
it's
pyramids have stood for 5,000 years.
incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah, one. I mean, it's
Slightly different architecture though.
it's a
Well, but also a group of people who thought that it was more important to be dead than alive.
True.
If
you
they were
certainly
to-
spend a lot more time being dead than you do spending alive.
I like the way they think.
But when you were growing up and like looking at like colleges and what was cool about college, like you liked like old buildings, right? Like weren't you impressed to see like an old college-y building with like
I mean, I
columns
went
on it
to
and
I went to a
bricks
like
and
a
ornate,
private
like,
liberal arts
stonework.
college that had like
Did you
the
like
whole
that
college
stuff?
Gothic. I went to a
That's
college
cool.
Gothic campus. The dorm that I lived in for a couple of years was built in like the 1860s.
It's
Like,
cool, right?
yeah,
You go to
absolutely.
an old library.
And they but they,
Our school looked insane.
they would even build new buildings.
But that's if you're into like
Oh,
the
I
old.
did.
But that's if you're into the old version of knowledge. It's whether you're into the old version of knowledge or the new version of
Oh,
knowledge.
yes.
Like if you're
Yeah.
into if you're into like, studying something that comes from a lineage, or if
Right.
you're into like, we're gonna rip everything down and we're gonna like have this new way
Yeah.
of thinking about everything that has nothing to do with anybody that came before us.
Make
You
it all
know,
out
like,
of concrete and glass, and it's gonna be terrible.
Yeah.
My mom made me tour this place
We're gonna
called
get 10 good
Lycoming,
years out of this
Pennsylvania, that looked like, the Ivy halls.
Mhm.
And she looked at me afterward, because she just wanted me to go one place that seemed like it would be a normal school where I could get a job. And she looked at me afterwards and she was like, "This isn't happening." And I was like, "No." But Purchase looked like somebody took a Soviet architect and just gave him a pile of bricks.
See, that's
Oh
cool
yeah,
too. Though.
I love college brutalism. Like
Yeah.
all those
Yeah.
buildings on Morgan campus. Like,
Yeah.
it's like so great.
Yeah.
There's one brutalist
Pro
building on
brutalism.
Towson campus. It's where enrollment services is, and everyone's always like, "Oh, like I guess they are going to tear it down at some
Yeah.
point." Everybody's like, "Oh, good riddance. That building's terrible." I'm like, "No, it is the only
Interesting
cool
thing,
building
yeah.
on
Yeah.
this campus because everything else looks like it was built in the 80s."
Yeah.
Because it was.
Yeah.
And even the new stuff, though, I guess the new stuff is all the concrete and glass stuff, which they're like immediately all these problems with.
Oh yeah.
Like all this new construction, like they make happen very quickly, and then within the first like 2 months of anybody trying to be in there, it's like their offices are flooding, and like
Right.
like all the screens on this video wall are starting
Yeah,
to pop out.
but the people who needed to make the money made the money, and that's all
Yeah.
that matters.
Well, and they
That's
still get to
all it
make
is.
the money because now clearly this building is too old and we have to tear it down.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
No, it's literally
That's the ironic thing about
Oh,
new
do
buildings,
over.
is that they suck
At-
way harder.
At Towson, when I started working
than
in Towson,
old
they were
buildings.
nearing completion on the new science complex, and everybody was very excited about it. But it was taking way longer than it needed to.
Right.
And then they hit a point where
Contractors
actually
were
even
doing it.
before they were done with we're done with the building, they actually had to have a second project to fix all of the problems with the building. It was like before people could even move into it, they had to go back and have a wholly separate building project just to address all of the fuck ups from the first round. And we're still dealing with stuff. Like they're power outlets in that building that just turn off. Sometimes.
Yeah, that's not ideal.
No, yeah, especially when it's like people's computers are plugged into them and all this stuff. There's just like millions and millions of little problems because
It seems like that's kind of built into the process of like big public works projects or big like building projects now. Is like does anyone know how to make buildings anymore?
Well, they're not
Yeah.
public
They,
works,
they
you know.
might
They're
not, but B, well, I'm just thinking in the back of my head listening to this about the Druid Hill project that's been going on for like 6
well, that
years
has a
longer
whole like
than,
litany of
like,
its own
so that's why I
bullshit.
just but that was supposed to be finished like years ago, and it's not even.
course
It's
not.
never.
Yeah.
really
And
was
also,
finished.
it was right after they started. It was determined that it really didn't need to happen in the first place.
Yeah.
I think the big reason that a lot of this stuff happens is that when you have a building project, you accept bids from contractors.
Yeah.
And usually the contractor that says like, yeah, I'll do this for you for the lowest
Right.
dollar amount is the one that's going to get the contract.
Right.
But then it's not a realistic estimate for
Right.
how much it's going to cost or how long it's going to take.
Right.
Well,
so
and
you
also
get,
you-
end up dumping
So you get to a-
way more money in.
Right.
And it's just a
you
mess.
get to a place where that company's like, well, we can't continue anymore. Like,
No,
it's
what
like,
hap-
well, you're not finished.
most
It's like,
often
well,
what
you're gonna have to pay
happens-
us more.
This is
Right?
a
Like-
story my brother tells all the time because he's like a computer programmer who does contract work for government systems.
Yeah.
Where he works for the feds, and
Uh-huh.
he's like, this is how contracting for the federal government works. Is some company comes in and is like, oh yeah, we'll do it for X amount of money, and we'll do it in 18 months for X amount of money, and then 24 months go by, and they're like, yeah, we're gonna need another 200,000. It's not done yet, and it's just like they just you
lucky
keep
if it's
getting
only
more money.
200,000
No, but it
too.
just
That's
like keeps happening. Like you just
Yeah.
Oh,
keep
yeah.
getting more money, and the project is never done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And he's
it's
like, this is how
It's
federal
built-
contracting
it's like
works.
built into it.
Yeah.
Totally. And
Yeah.
and it happens kind of all over the place. It's
Yeah.
just like that's how it
Bureaucracy.
But then there's also this issue where they're doing it, but then like it's not even good at the
He's
end.
doing a shit job. It's
Well,
like
exactly.
It's not even-
Well,
not
if it's
even-
ever finished.
Well, and-
Yeah, because the job is not building a building. The job is
making
Making
money.
extending
profits.
this as long as
Yes,
possible.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then getting money.
And then
Yeah.
there's like all this stuff like
extracting wealth.
you know, I'm dealing with all the AV equipment that's in these buildings, and
Yeah.
when they like put the building plan together and everything, they're not asking me like how should all this shit be set up, like what's going to work well, and what are people going to be able to use correctly.
Right.
They have an outside consultant
Right.
come in and be like,
Getting
all
paid
this
a
stuff
lot.
will work, and so then you get things where it's like it's just totally completely fucking insane.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, there are all these poured concrete floors, so if you ever need to run any other cable, you can't. Or like, we're gonna have this big equipment rack full of stuff that you need to access the back of in a recessed cabinet that's off the ground. So you have to bring in rails to pull it out anytime there's a problem.
Oh, yes, that's
Or
terrible.
hey, we're gonna save a few bucks on the touch panel controllers for this stuff. Instead, we're gonna use iPads.
Yeah.
And those iPads just get unplugged and then they die, and they're on these like security mounts. So you have to like get open so that you can plug the thing back in and turn it on.
Yes.
And it's like
yeah.
it's just such a disaster. Like every building project
Yeah.
on that scale is just a disaster because
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with the people who are using it.
Right. What
It's
they're
just about spending money.
what they were setting up for was like the opening day when like the 5 wealthy people
Oh,
involved
it's
came
yeah,
and like looked
100.
it over.
It's
The
100%.
Yeah, like hey, look an
Yeah.
iPad.
It's 100% for the walkthrough video.
Yeah.
And that they can then use to get more people to give them money.
Yeah.
And then everyone else is just having to fucking deal with it.
any kind of touch screen technology and any kind of thing. Yeah, it's always going to be like some kind of
We live in the
nightmare.
most successful third world country ever.
and it's reinforced because we all expect it to like nobody is ever like, how could this happen? Like everybody's like, of course this is how it is.
Right.
And part of that is because most people go to their job and are also half-assing it.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
none of this, we wouldn't die for these things, but we're not passionate about
Right.
them.
That
They're
goes
just
back
filling
to-
up our life.
Yeah.
We resent that we're doing them.
Right.
Well,
Definitely.
And the resentment gets in the work.
And then there's the manager class who don't really have anything to do and are finding ways to be like, oh, I see you half-assing it, and then like
Because they resent the workers.
exactly, yeah.
It's a culture. It's not a culture of fear anymore. It's a culture of resentment, which is why people can
And
storm the
and
Capitol because they're
avoidance.
not afraid. They resent.
That's what drives me nuts about the like administration. That they have so little to do that they spend all of their time coming up with like mission statements and value statements and like
God,
and it's
so
just
bad.
and like you read one of them and it's transparent. It's not transparent. It's like completely opaque language.
Yeah,
that
that means nothing.
means
Using the
nothing.
most words that
Yeah, using the most words possible. Like Madison actually got like the president of MICA was like, hey, like we want your feedback because she heads up the staff empowerment council. She's like, hey, they were like, we want your feedback on this statement of purpose or whatever. And Madison and her folks like went over and they're like,
Yeah, so this is like, if you want people to be able to read and understand any of this, you need to rewrite it. It needs to actually make sense and not just use a bunch of buzzwords.
Yeah.
And then they sent them another version of it that was like not any different, and they're like, yeah, this is still a bit of a problem. And they're like, oh, well, it's got to go out tomorrow, so I guess it's not going to change.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's even a thing in it about like, it's very important for us to emphasize creative placemaking,
Right.
or something. And then Madison's like, this doesn't. What is that? It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. And then the president of this college was like, oh, creative placemaking is like this emerging concept. It's been around for like 10 years. It's very popular, but it's also very new. It's very important, and we have grants that are associated with it, so we're definitely going to be doing it. And here's a website that you can look at to find out more about it. Like, he does not say what it is, because he clearly does not know what it is.
How long it has existed.
Yeah, it's like, it's definitely
That's
a
the
thing.
definition.
It's a thing, and we're spending money on it.
Yeah.
And
hell yeah.
Here's a link that you can read about it, because I'm not going to tell you what it is.
It's crazy.
It's fucking
crazy.
It's bullshit.
Yeah.
All of these motherfuckers.
I know exactly what you're talking
Yeah.
about.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's nuts. Yeah. It's like every there's always like waves of this shit too. Like, it's whatever gets funneled down from Bloomberg, or like the huge philanthropies, these like words, then, you know, the smaller like entities below are like, oh, these are the words we need to use to tap into those funding streams.
Hey, working in the art museum, none of that shit goes on in there. It's 100% just, you know.
Bedford's moving on, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nonprofits are
That's
just
a whole
like
conversation.
Nonprofits are just this fucking thing where it's like, oh, we're a business. We just have to spend all of the money that we make.
Just weird.
So
Aaron
it
one
doesn't.
time came up to me and said, "This tarot card business you're starting, that's a grift, right? Will you just admit that it's a grift?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then a day later, I realized I should have explicitly said, because all the jobs are grifts. There's not a thing that's not a
wasn't a
grift.
Exactly.
Yeah, just
wasn't a
just
grift.
trying to make or sell anything in a way to support yourself is a grift.
Well,
That's just-
yeah,
I guess,
like
is that the definition
the guy
of
working
grift?
for Hopkins is grifting
That's the case,
Hopkins.
sure.
Hopkins grifting him, and Aaron, you're grifting Joy, and she's grifting you.
Yeah, it's a co-grift situation.
You know, like, where do you think there's not a grift?
Yeah.
It's just mutual,
Capitalism in and of
it's just
itself.
mutual grifting.
It's just
all
a
around.
giant scam.
Yeah, it's just how good your grift is.
Yeah, I mean, you can't put out more than you take in. Once you reverse, once you're taking in more than you put out, you're in grift territory.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So this kind of goes back to this.
Yeah.
This is why we need a Calde.
I do feel like it does.
I wish Wolf was here listening. I think he would like hate the sorry state of affairs.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
like
I'm sure.
So I feel like this quote that I maybe already talked about last time ties into the agency and also to the new knowledge versus old knowledge. This quote stuck out, and I bet you underlined it too. It's so curiously antiquated in 2022. When Chenille says, "No more crying. Other girls are always telling me how tough I am because I'm so big. I think I better start trying to live up to it." Like, that would be that's like almost offensive today. That whole concept behind this quote. I find
Totally.
I find it very interesting.
I think naming it is, but as it's actually really insightful, because this is how like almost all women relationships work. Is that like I get bossed around so much by people who think or say that they're helping me, and it's such bullshit. Like, yes, in name, like, it's hard to talk about because you're not allowed to be like, you know, it's people only want to talk about like positive things between women, and no one wants to like actually pull apart and reconcile why the relationships between women are so terrible. We just want to be like, well, it's men's fault. We'll just be nice to each other. And it really doesn't work like that, because for a lot of women, being nice to you is being a bully. And it
So you
sucks.
see this as being a negative thing. That,
Well,
like,
she-
girls telling her how tough that
Yeah,
she is.
because she's
is
not.
bad.
If she's not tough, and they're like, "Oh, because you're not allowed to be vulnerable," because people are like, "Well, you're like the big tough one." You know what I mean? And like, I don't think that she actually does, based on like the descriptions of her relationships with the other women, but like it can happen where like if everybody is saying like you're so tough, you're the strong one, you're the powerful one, that they feel responsible for everybody else, and that's like a pressure on them.
And that's bad.
It's complicated.
It is complicated.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't
this
like.
is kind of like
it
the
doesn't-
question, the grift question, where I'm like, well, nothing is good or bad, so I can't answer that question.
I mean, it doesn't just happen to women either. I mean, I
No,
feel
it
like
doesn't
it's
at all.
we're put in these positions where I don't know. Like I thought I did not understand that I had anxiety for like 30 years of my life because everyone around me told me how laid back I was, and I just believed that.
There are very few
Because-
things I hate more than someone telling me how I am.
Exactly.
I hate
It's
that
so
so
fucked.
much. I hate
I'm
that.
fascinated by it.
Oh, I hate it. I hate it more than
It's fascinating
anything.
and
Like
I mean,
it's very-
in the
it's like
entire
you
world.
can
It's
learn
like
a
the thing I
lot
most
from-
hate.
What's an example?
Yeah, it's like this is the
Just
me
like
that lives in
you're-
your head.
just any-
That's neat, and
Yeah.
I'll assimilate it. But I mean,
Like if
But I
someone
feel
said
like-
I
oh,
agree.
Jen, you're so funny or something like that, or like you have it all.
It's
you
not.
have it all
It's
figured
not
out.
so much about like.
It's not like compliments. It's
But
like,
it's not even about compliment or not compliment. It's just it's more about it's not so much like descriptors, but it's like how I'm trying to. It's
Yeah.
not so much like adjectives. It's like people trying to tell you how you think or like what. Like how you're oriented or something. There's like a way. There's just I'm trying to like
it's familiar.
pinpoint
It's
it.
too familiar.
But it's not even that. It's
it's
just
aggressive.
I feel like my thing is that I feel like I should be allowed to like change constantly, and I do.
Yeah.
But there's this thing where I feel like there's a constant. My whole life I felt this way, that there's like a constant push pull between me feeling like I'm constantly changing and people trying to describe me back into like a past version of myself or something.
That's bad faith. That is.
I hate it so much. I
It's a
fucking
magic
that's
spell.
The Sartrean bad faith is exactly that, where like any time that somebody is trying to reduce you to a single point of your being, it's like they're just discounting all those other parts of you and your ability to be different things.
right.
But it's also divine possession and divine invasion, living up to the expectations of others rather than being yourself is participating in that communal, like conspiratorial, as in we breathe together kind pneuma.
Yeah, but there's a way.
Divinity.
But there's a way that I can conceive of you that is not like a limiting thing. Like I can still conceive
There's
of
a
you.
spectrum of healthy to unhealthy
Yeah,
that that involves love. If we love our community in a healthy way, the expectations of others are empowering for the individual. When we don't love our community, and our community therefore doesn't love us, that's when it becomes this painting you into a corner. I got a name for you kind of thing.
I think by the same token, love for yourself and self-knowledge is really important if you're not going to let that sort of like projected being that's getting put on you become everything.
Yeah, that's
because
it's a convection.
so if you're not like, the reason I didn't know didn't have anxiety is because nobody was like telling me that was something that I could have or that I might have, and I had no language to even express like. I couldn't understand how I even felt.
Yeah.
because
very hard to-
nobody was.
It's very hard to know yourself.
Yeah, exactly, and especially when everybody's like, "Oh, yeah, this is how you are," and you're like, "Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds good. You guys seem to like it that I'm this way."
Right.
So,
Well,
I guess that is right.
It's
but,
a technique in child rearing.
oh yeah,
Is to like take your kid, and if you're trying to lead him in this direction, you just tell him,
You are this.
right.
This
Yeah,
is-
you
that's-
can read good. Math is hard.
that's not in your character.
Right, and the little kid just believes you. Oh, that's what I'm like. Okay, and then they start to gravitate in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Wait, so Ryan, you think that the girls telling Chenille is like a source of courage for her?
I think it's that the context that it's in is really, really interesting. In that, like, in a decadent context, this becomes
It's
a
a-
limiting thing. but in like in a
remember
underground
something
tunnel
like
where like taluses are exploding, it's suddenly very different. That like when you're just like at an office job and nothing's really at stake, and someone's like, "You're so tough because you're tall," it becomes this like, "Why are you putting me in a cage?" But when you're underground and your friends are maybe gonna die, and she's saying like, I've resisted being tough because people told me I was, and I didn't feel tough. But maybe I'm looking at it the wrong way.
I guess there's a utility to being able to like sort of take up that projected mantle. If the moment arises.
Well, it's like being tough.
It's not good for you to live in that, I think.
Is this when she's talking with Incus, when he's kind of like guiding her, or is this earlier?
Yeah, the striving.
Okay, when they're like walking down the tunnel, and this is where, and Incus is like, "Oh, it must have been awesome to be Scylla." That's like another aspect of this whole thing, which kind of reminds me of.
I think there are some things, some qualities that can only be projected, like toughness or beauty. Like I think about people talking about like, I don't like how I look. I don't like how I look. And I'm like, yeah, but the only way you can like how you look is from other people looking at you. So if people are saying, I like how you look for these reasons, you have to think about that. When you look in the mirror, you're only looking from inside your head. So you can never have the accurate look of how you look. You can only trust what other people say, or I guess it's better when it's love. I don't feel love. I don't feel love. But like the only way you can feel love is if you feel the love that other people are giving you. And I think toughness is the same thing. You can't be tough. You can only accept the toughness that other people see in you.
Yes. And then there's also a funny thing in here too about I'm so big, but that I'm not my bigness. My bigness is like a weird incidental thing that happened to me. But I'm starting to consider now that my life is in danger, maybe it's like
this is kind of the second. This is the first or second place. Well, because she also talks about the knife, and she's like, I thought your knife should fit you like a shoe, but now I see that if you're weak, you need a big gun. And if you're big, you don't actually need anything that big. I feel like this is similar. Mm-hmm. But how? How is it similar?
The smaller somebody is, the bigger a shiv she needs.
Then I guess, this is like partially why I feel like this is antiquated. It's like we've come into a place where your own ability to like write your own self and define your own self has become like so solidified that you can negate anything that other people see about you or anything that's like carried in your physical body by choice.
Let's compare this with what's happening to Mint, right? Because I feel like there's similarities and differences that I don't understand yet. So
the proximity is important.
Right. Yeah. So Chenille everybody's always told her she's tough and she's deciding to live up to it. Nobody's ever thought that about Mint. But Mint has to live up to it now, and is. So what's happening here between these two different characters?
I guess, Mint's whole thing is service. She wants to serve. That's the most important thing to her. And now she's been given a task.
I think it's maybe also that Mint is finding this thing out about herself.
Is Chenille not?
I think it feels like Chenille is grappling. Yes, Chenille is finding out things about herself as well, but I feel like it's in conversation with the things that people have told her about herself. And Mint as a more like I feel like Mint's the external influences on Mint's personality are a lot more limited.
I bet not a lot of people talk to Mint about what Mint is like.
Yeah, it's the other Sibs and
no, she spends her entire life kind of like disappearing.
Yeah, exactly. So Mint is actually she's digging into herself in relation only to herself, or I guess the external input being like this occasion that she has to rise to.
But is she not being programmed? Like,
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's a part of
the
it, too.
expectation
Yeah.
isn't from her fellow people.
Right.
The expectation is from a god.
Yeah.
right on the story level, right? Like,
Yeah.
we can assume that she's
We
been, that the gods have like,
On the
put
story-
themselves.
Are you saying Gene Wolfe is programming, or are you saying?
Well, no. Just like in the story, the reason why Mint has becomes like a soldier, right, is because she's been possessed by a god in a way, right? That's what I mean by program.
It's why it's interesting that
She's been picked out of the crowd, right?
Explain. I might not be understanding this.
Well,
so I'm just trying
she's
to talk
partially
through it.
possessed. She's got a little bit of God in her.
That's
Yeah.
what
Right.
how I
From
read
earlier,
Right, from earlier.
from Kypris.
And she says when she's trying to talk loud, she says that she pictured herself as a trumpeter, and then she pictured herself as a trumpet because she is the instrument of a god. It works better. Like the trumpeter is the one who's playing the instrument. She is the instrument, and that's why that progression happens, I think.
Oh yeah.
She's called both a trumpet and a sword.
Yeah, another instrument.
So I guess thinking about it on a more metaphorical level, then what's the representation there of like what's the god Kypris has possessed her? So if we're thinking about it in a like I don't know a more materialist way,
You talk about Mint?
yeah.
No,
What did I
Sphinx
say?
is in Mint.
Sphinx is in Mint.
Hell yeah.
Well, I thought it was Kypris. No.
Kypris isn't in
It's
No,
Kypris,
you're right.
but then she calls on Spigix, and that's what makes her voice loud. And then Echidna
Right.
comes and talks to her.
Okay.
But there's also mythographical reasons, not from these books, that like Sphinx and Kypris are kind of the same lady.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
So like there's crossover there.
yeah.
Brassy women.
Yeah, the gods never come
Well,
along.
Love and War. Oh, thank you.
They always bring
Love and
friends.
War is
Pretty
often
much the same
combined.
thing.
Yeah.
Pretty much the same.
That makes sense.
They're like the most iconic lovers of all time.
So is it like
Pretty much the same.
Mint is she's responding to and sort of like internalizing this like communal like spirit that is happening. I guess I'm just curious like what's happening here on a more metaphorical level.
Well, yeah, yes, me too. I feel like so Chenille is finding things out about herself because she's coming to accept a role that other people are putting on her and finding that she can live up to it. Mint is finding out something about herself that nobody ever expected.
Right.
Because her expectation is coming from divinity, which is what the community needs rather than what any individual person needs. People need Chenille. Everybody needs Mint.
And so this is Chenille is in darkness
Mhm.
and Mint is in light.
Mhm.
That, like Chenille is doing an introspective
Right.
journey
This
and
chthonic or whatever,
Yeah.
like literally.
A catabasis and an anabasis.
Yeah.
and then Mint's doing the opposite. Mint's not like introspecting to find out what Mint is really like.
Mm-hmm.
Mint is being the thing that Mint needs to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not about what Mint is like.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And it's funny, like to keep trying to bring it back into like the way that the world has changed since this was written. That it's like all of the daytime stuff is completely unconscious now. Like I feel like there's been a funny flip of like the world that we think is the world of light is the introspective dark thing that says I'm looking at myself and I'm telling you I might look big but I feel small. And like that's the impregnable kind of truth. Whereas like the thing that's happening that we would consider, I feel like that would be our darkness, is like the unanalyzed, uncritical participation in a mass movement. Does this make sense what I'm saying?
Sure, if you look inside yourself and you don't see others, then you're alone. You know? Like your introspection needs to be able to take you into that communal spirit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're alone, and then you're just and that's when you get into the why live because death is meaningless.
Yeah.
You know what?
Sorry, this conversation just like veered into somewhere that I've never thought about. Well, like it's not like blowing my mind, but just like
Don't get it twisted.
the
It's not.
concept.
It's not blowing my mind.
It just the way that Ryan said it, it just seems really obvious, but I never thought about it. How like the introspection is actually the light, because you're bringing light to darkness.
Right.
Where the conscious, the outside, that's where more things are more mechanical and more just like. I've been thinking because I'm sort of like back in the office now, I am seeing more and more how like everything, every little like movement, every part of the day is just like we're all just like on this big clock that like existence is just a clock, and it's just like every day someone comes in at 8:30 and says hello in the same exact way. No one actually does that, but that's just an example. And like you hear someone, the same person say hello to you in the exact same fucking way every single day, but you have to do that to protect yourself from the outside world. You have to say hello in the exact same fucking way every day to keep like the important part of you safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't, somebody's going to come in and ask why you didn't, and then
Right.
they're going to be
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
into my
Oh, yeah.
insight part, which is not. Yeah.
You usually say hello like this every morning, but I noticed that you said it a little differently. Like,
Are you okay?
no,
need to
oh
talk.
my god, I have a coworker who's constantly asking me if I'm okay.
Oh no, that's the
it's like-
worst.
I'm at work.
I was. If you would stop asking me that, I would be.
Yeah, exactly.
But
That
it
has
puts
made
me,
me
and like,
mad.
it's just like, it's a light shining on you, and you're like, I was just trying to just answer a couple emails and drink a cup of coffee, and now I'm like, ah. But I just am like, yeah. And she's like, okay, just checking.
Ew, what?
One time I met.
What the fuck is that? What is
One
that?
time
What
I-
even is that?
Like one time I randomly
Yeah.
mentioned, and I actually think that this might be breaking a law, and I was randomly mentioned,
You said breaking the law?
a stupid law, but I was randomly mentioned going to the pharmacy and picking up a prescription, and she was like, just so you know, if you need any time off work, it's totally fine. Like, my fucking birth control, which isn't your business either.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Maybe she thought you were pregnant. And also, like,
She
taking,
hoped you were pregnant.
taking time off from an office job is, like, inherent. Like, you
Yeah.
understand it.
You're like, yes. You're like,
I have
yes.
a contract that
Yeah,
describes it.
yes, I know,
Right.
and I will. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not like...
Yeah. She is like she's
Well, it's like, don't come into work sick because I don't want to get sick.
well, yes.
Yeah.
I
So
think
it's like
probably.
nice on the surface, right? Like, hey, don't worry. Like, if you need to take
Yeah.
time off, it's all good, right? But there's also like a little bit of an expression of power in that too.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'll allow
yeah.
this.
The
Oh
thing-
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm giving you permission.
The
Right.
thing I was about to say is that she does have like explicitly have seniority and
Right.
is my supervisor.
Right.
So like she's trying to be like a sensitive and like helpful. She's like bosses usually like hate their people and vice versa, and I'm trying to be nice, but it's just
Right.
like, okay, dude.
Anytime
it's
someone is
new
trying to
management.
consciously be a cool boss, it's almost always like a bad sign.
It's like when I go to the West Coast and I'm trying to cross the street and they stop and let me cross the street and I'm thinking to myself, fuck you, I'll take my jaywalking
Yeah.
space where I do. Don't
Absolutely.
give it to me, I take it.
That's exactly how I
That's
feel.
a very
about
Baltimore.
Yeah, it is.
It
Oh
is.
man, yeah, the West Coast, they
Specifically
do not
Baltimore.
understand jaywalking at
No.
all.
And that's
You
why
can
they'll
get
give
a
you a fucking
ticket for
ticket
it there, yeah.
Nor do they in Canada.
Oh yeah, when I went to where did we? I'm trying to remember what town we were in. We were in some kind of off-brand town. In Canada.
Off brand.
Edmonton. It was Edmonton. It was
Amazing.
Yeah, Mason, I took Mason up there.
Amazing.
To
Amazing.
Do, visuals for some shows I was playing, and we we're jaywalking, just normal Baltimore style. And then, like,
Just
3
being
hours
normal.
into the day, at one point we were like talking, and then, you know, like we look and we start walking, and then we realize there was like 10
Yeah.
people at the intersection with us, and we're like in the middle of the street. We turn around and look at them,
There's
and
no
we're like,
cars.
looking, there's no cars anywhere in sight.
They're all like,
Yeah, and they're
Scandalized.
they're staring at us like they like almost like, what are these guys up to or something?
Yeah.
Like they thought we were about to begin a heist or something.
Yeah.
And then we realized, like, oh my god, jaywalking is a thing.
In Germany, they have signs
you're
at the
in a
intersections that say sometimes that say something to the effect of like be an example to the children, you know, wait for the signal or whatever. Like it's like don't be a bad
it's
guy.
like we all know that it's silly to wait when there are no cars coming, but
It's
we
like
gotta,
for the
we
children,
gotta show the children.
do it properly.
No, it's
But
so- it's
this
social
is the
behavior.
same thing that we've been
Program.
talking about, right? This is
Yeah.
this is a divine possession that you're going to do something that clearly doesn't make any sense, but we have to do it because this is our culture, and if we don't do this, the machine breaks down.
Yeah.
Our
This is
machine is
the-
broken in Baltimore. That's why
Exactly.
we don't have to do it.
Exactly,
We know
exactly.
the machine's broken.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's already
That's
broken.
true. Yeah,
Absolutely true.
I guess the machine is
Yeah.
so transparently broken.
Yeah.
That it's just
Right, because
like,
the other half of the other side of the coin is that like if you're at one of those intersections where people are supposed to yield to you as a pedestrian, they almost never do.
No.
So it's like it goes both ways,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I mean, then it's the same. Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. Nobody has regard. Like
Yeah.
whether you're in a car or walking,
Right.
I don't give a shit about you.
we know that the laws and the rules of jaywalking aren't going to really apply to my specific case.
I mean,
And
there's no
it's
cars
really-
here right now.
Yeah, it's really up to me to look out for myself and decide when it's safe to cross. Because if I go by what they're saying, I'm going to be wasting my time sitting on this curb
Or
get
hit by a car.
well,
Yeah.
I think there's something also. There is an inherent like trust almost that happens with it, where it's like, I mean, obviously, like people piss each other off, and it like can get a little bit hairy sometimes, but like. There's still this kind of idea of like, yeah, I'm gonna walk out into the street and you're gonna stop.
Yeah, are you more interested in getting there fast, or are you
Yeah.
more interested in dealing with killing someone?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so I don't think that it's like this like fundamentally
either way.
like caring
Go either
act
way, yeah.
necessarily, but there is this kind of like, it's like the Baltimore systems have broken down so thoroughly, it's created this like folk trust that
I don't
where
even
we can
know
like
if it's that. I mean, I definitely agree. It's like everything is broken down, and I don't necessarily think there's like a social contract to not hit people in town.
It's not.
I don't think.
I don't think it's quite
that's there.
that either. But there's something that happens.
There is a
There's-
social contract
Yeah.
of some kind, though, because
I
it's like an
don't know.
I think there is like an agreement
It's constantly
that
being
this is
renegotiated.
how we do it.
Well,
It's like I'm just gonna walk out into the street when I
think,
feel like
I think
it.
it's a tradition, and it's like or not. It's behavior from Baltimore.
There's-
Like, Baltimore doesn't have
There's a-
adequate public transit or ways to get around.
Yeah.
So you have like a culture of people who are in a hurry walking through the space. And so that, which you don't have in Scandinavia or Canada or well-functioning cities. You know, people A, it's okay if they're a little bit late for something. B, they have a way to get from point A to point B in an economical way, and they have the resources to access that. In Baltimore, you don't have that. So there's human beings walking through the space as fast as possible, right? And so that the kind of behavior over time builds into a culture where people are like on Greenmount just walking out into like oncoming traffic, stopping in the middle. Now that's shocking to people from other areas, right? You bring my mom in from Vermont.
Oh,
she's
yeah.
like, holy shit!
Yeah, what is
And
happening?
I'm just like, don't worry. That person's gonna stop right there on the median, and I'm just gonna speed past them. That's regular.
That's what we do.
Regular
That's what we do.
society.
And also, by the same token, you might be driving along and then eventually find that two cars have parked in the middle of the street just to talk to each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
You know?
Yeah,
It's the complete opposite of it. Nobody's going nowhere now. And if you honk at them, they're like, "Fuck you!"
But it's
I'm getting out of here and I'm shooting you.
But I think the beautiful thing about it is that it is a folk phenomenon. Like it's not something that anybody like designed.
Right.
It's something that emerged.
Users
From a lack of design.
Yeah, exactly. But like that's what happens. Like human systems do emerge from these like
Yeah.
from chaos
Weird
or
pockets,
whatever.
yeah.
And even if they're still chaotic, there's a
It's-
I don't know. There's
right.
there's a real beauty to it,
Yeah.
which that I'm into, and I think that like like whatever L.A. or San Francisco or Edmonton, I guess, are these. I think the kind of cities that are like they're like well run in a sense, but there's also this kind of like.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like wild, this like really intense bureaucracy that kind of like maintains a lot of that. Like there's a trade off there, I think, in a lot of ways where like the Baltimore jaywalking is like a people power thing that happens, and like crosswalks and signs and signs that say please use the crosswalk or whatever those are institutional systems that are of control that are imposed on us. So it's I don't know.
I will say that I like both. Like I like jaywalking and I like the kind of like fast and loose Baltimore style, but I also don't mind. Like I'm not the person who gets mad if someone stops for you. Like I'm like, great, I'll cross now.
Well, there's the solar gods.
Wait,
who
who
can
would get mad if someone crossed?
He just described that. Kenny fucking hates it. Anyone who is is
Oh,
from
yeah.
Baltimore
Oh, yeah, definitely.
hates it. Like,
like why
they-
are you?
It's like if you're
It's passive aggressive.
Yeah.
if you're at it's not.
It is.
No, but that's what it feels like.
It's
That's
like
why.
fuck you,
Yeah.
I'll do what I want.
Excuse me, Mr. Walker.
Yeah, like if you're at a four-way stop or something,
Yeah.
and you're gonna cross the street and a car comes up and stops, Kenny, if they like stop and wait for you, Kenny's like, "Come on, what are you doing? Come on!" He's like, "Come on!"
So my father,
It's like
all
he's
the
just
time.
like.
my father, who grew up
But
in
it's
West,
like if you
driving-
stop for
thought about
someone,
that
they're
way.
mad because it's like they know that it's faster for you to drive off and you're
Yeah.
making everything take longer or
Yes.
something like that. It's
Exactly.
like just fucking go so I can go.
Well, it's also like you don't need to break the rules. I'm breaking the rules. You follow your rules, and I'll break the
It's
rules
more-
on my
yeah,
own
it's
time.
Yeah.
important for the car to follow the rules. Second
Yeah,
of all,
yeah.
I'm not fucking crossing in front of an impatient car.
Yeah.
Like, no, fuck you. I'm not crossing in
Also,
front of
if
an
it's
impatient
just
car.
one person in one lane has stopped, they don't control everybody else who's going through there. So it's like, look, I'm gonna feel this out for myself, dude. Like, you go.
Yeah,
Kenny,
that's the
he
worst,
just-
when
he goes,
someone's like doing
"Come
this, and you're like, "There's another lane of cars on the other side of your shoulder." And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
walking in front of you.
Yeah,
Like,
100%.
Yeah, well,
that happens a lot.
I totaled my first car because I turned left in front of like two lanes of traffic where people were waving me
I did
on,
that too.
and then a third lane where a Beamer was
Yeah,
speeding.
I
up.
did
This
the
is
exact
not what I'm
same
talking about, though. I'm talking
That's
about
different.
regular one-lane, four-way stop,
Right,
only
sure,
one
right.
car anywhere around.
That's-
Like,
that's
there's
the only
one
scenario.
car.
My father would break.
Control system and the more like folk wisdom of like I'm gonna let people go because that's a nice thing to do. Or
I
like-
mean, I
and
think
sometimes it's a care thing. Sometimes it's like a compelling appropriateness thing.
I
Like, there
think
are
it
a lot of
also
different-
depends on density, right? Like Baltimore, there's not that many fucking people around. Like it's not as crucial that things are like functioning
Yeah.
in the way that they're designed to
Yeah,
function.
yeah.
I do, I can appreciate a German sensibility where you're in a city where there are a lot more pedestrians,
Yeah.
and there's
That changes
like
things a lot.
public transportation is like functioning properly. Like we have a like situation where like things are working as a system.
Well,
like
now that
we
you're
have
saying this,
decided
though,
like
how
we
does
have.
it work in like I don't know, like Beijing or like some like Delhi or some like
I'm
crazy
just saying.
dense
What I'm
city
saying is like I
that doesn't have all
understand.
that infrastructure.
I understand
Two
the
interesting
scenario.
examples.
I understand
Yeah.
the scenario. I understand the thought process that says, well, we have decided that we're just going to make society like function properly. And part of that for everyone, and part of that is that you are a piece of a larger puzzle. You are not an individual crossing the street when you feel like crossing the
You're a
street.
human
You are
unit.
a piece of this larger thing, and this is how we've decided that it's going to work. And if we all do it, then it actually is much more efficient and works better. Like if we all do it, then it works